Hi there. This is the third of the four lectures for week 5 of HS 117, History of Christianity from 1500 to the present. Today, I am going to be talking about the migration of Christians from Europe to North America and the changes that brought about in the North American situation, as well as the changes in Christianity. You may be familiar with images like these. This may be, if you attended school in the United States, images like this may represent what you think of when you think of English colonists in the early period of migration to North America. This painting of pilgrims is from 1867. It purports to depict the pilgrims of 1620 who came over on the Mayflower, but the date of the painting is important. 1867, because after the Civil War, the idea of a shared New England heritage of the United States took on new meaning and significance in an effort to reunify the country. The memories, the sort of public memory that we have of early English settlers, early European settlers, doesn't always match up with reality. This is a map from 1656. It's a French map showing North America. And you see the territories claimed by Spain over here. All of this area is called New Mexico. You see that California is imagined as an island. All of this territory over here is claimed by France. And you see that the English settlements, Virginia is the only part of the English settlements that you really see. And New England doesn't even appear. So I'm just going to say, I'm not going to say much about New Spain because we've talked a great deal about New Spain. I just want to point out that the first printing press in the Americas was in Mexico City in 1539. By 1604, before the first English settlers arrived, Mexico City already had a cathedral, a university, and 2 theological seminaries, and Spanish settlements by then extended into what is now California, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, and Florida. I also want to talk a bit about New France. French migrants to North America were primarily fur traders and missionaries. The Jesuit missionaries who came to North America, like Spanish missionaries, sought to convert, and here I mean French Jesuits, they sought to convert indigenous people to Christianity, much like the missionaries in New Spain. They tended to work much more within the structures and systems of indigenous culture. They often also tried to protect the indigenous people from what they considered the bad influence of French traders. And as you could see on the map, the territory claimed by France in North America was very large, but French colonists were few in number. European settlement of the region was pretty sparse. You've read an excerpt, or you'll be reading an excerpt this week from the Jesuit Relations. I wanted to show you what a huge body of work that little excerpt comes from. The Jesuits every year sent reports to their superiors in France with information about their activities over the previous year. And those were edited, organized, and published to promote the Jesuit missions. 73 volumes were produced, not all of those. It's only kind of the middle years that are exactly, that exactly follow that relations format. But, there are many, many years of documents from the French missions organized together. And these have become an important written source for understanding the Native societies that interacted with the French. One of the bequests, I guess, of the French missionaries was just a great deal of information about Indigenous societies. And this is a source that you can easily consult. It's available, I think it's available online for free. It's also available through the Columbia libraries. One notable figure who comes out of New France is Saint Kateri Tekakwitha, who is the first American-born saint. She was the daughter of a Mohawk mother and a Christian Algonquin mother. She was baptized at the age of 19 and spent the last years of her life in a Christian Mohawk community near Montreal. And there has been a long tradition of praying to her for healing, initially by French settlers primarily. The Catholic Church has promoted her as a symbol of Indigenous American Catholicism, and devotion to her has grown in many Indigenous Catholic communities in North America. However, Mohawks themselves, for reasons that you might understand, remain fairly ambivalent about her. So the English came to Virginia and New England, and these aren't Virginia and New England as we understand them today. They were essentially like two big territories imagined to be sort of touching each other. Virginia to the south, Virginia was everything to the south of English claims, and New England was everything north. And before any settlers arrived, English explorers, traders, and fishermen had landed on the North American coast, had explored it, had been involved in economic activities. And as a result, European diseases were already decimating Indigenous groups when the first settlers arrived. What was a little bit different about the English settlers, both in Virginia and in New England, is that they tended to migrate as families and to settle as families. This meant that intermarriage with the Indigenous people was not as was not looked on as favorably. The children of unions between Native Americans and the English were, whether those children were the result of marriage or consensual relationships or rape, were typically not integrated into English society, but they were considered separate and different and Indians. Jamestown, the first continuous English settlement in North America, was established in 1607. And the Plymouth settlers in New England landed in 1620. A few notes about Virginia, named for Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. The Church of England was the established Church of Virginia from 1624, and Virginia remained, there was diversity of religion, but Virginia remained much, much more Anglican in character than New England ever was. There were no resident bishops in Virginia for a long time, and vestries held significant power over congregations and over ministers. And so the Anglicanism in Virginia gradually developed a reputation for being a little, let's say a little looser, a little more poorly organized than at home. Tobacco culture was introduced in Virginia in 1619, and that same year, enslaved Africans were brought to the colony and used for labor. And here we see the term Christian kind of being conflated with European. This is one of your documents, very difficult to read the handwriting, I know, but I wanted you to see this because a part of this census lists people as others not Christians in the service of the English. And you hear Negro men, Negro women, listed as a part of that group, marked off as others not Christian. In a 1667 Virginia law declared that baptism changed nothing about the bondage or freedom of a human being. I want to begin the conversation about New England by talking about a figure you may know, Tisquantum. You may know him by the name of Squanto. He was a member of the Patuxet tribe, and he was kidnapped by an English explorer named Thomas Hunt in 1614 and trafficked to Spain, where he was ransomed by Spanish friars of their order is unknown. Somehow he traveled to England in 1617 or 1618. He traveled to Newfoundland as a translator for a trading expedition, and he returned to America for good in 1619. When he returned, he learned that his own entire tribe had been wiped out in an epidemic during his absence, and he went to live with another group. And what you most likely know about him already is that he served as a liaison and translator between the English settlers at Plymouth and the Pokanokets. He lived with the English for 20 months until he died of disease. And his story is one that I find very, very poignant and very surprising, because I grew up knowing about Squanto, but had no idea that when the first English settlers landed, this person that I knew by that name was in a way more worldly, more well-traveled, more multilingual perhaps than, well, I guess the settlers also spoke Dutch because that group had lived in Holland, but worldly, fluent in English, familiar with English culture, educated, and really quite different from the way he is imagined in that sort of popular memory of the Pilgrims. The migrants to New England were devout Puritans, and they organized the migrations, but they weren't the only ones to migrate. The migrations included servants, skilled workers, and children recruited under the apprentice system. So some of them were migrating for other than religious reasons. And William Bradford, as early as 1621, wrote something that tells us that the colony was not a unified religious group. He said, it is our calamity that we are beyond expectation, yoked with some ill-conditioned people who will never do good, but corrupt and abuse others. Later, the migrations by the 18th century, the people migrating from Europe to North America would include the Dutch and the Swedish, some Germans, Catholics from Britain. It became a very diverse landscape. But as I hope you've seen, it was fairly diverse in religion and culture from the very beginning. Thank you.